Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of our witnesses, particularly for all of your service to our country. We all appreciate that. I understand that you all have clearly articulated real problems in readiness, number one, and number two, that lack of readiness costs lives, and lives are directly at stake, and that concerns us all. I think the last time this possibility of a real hollow force and significant lack of readiness happened was in the 1990s. General Odierno, I'll start with you. Would you consider that challenge then, or excuse me, let me rephrase it, would you consider our challenge today greater or lesser than that challenge then?
I believe our challenge is much greater today than it has been since I've been in the Army in terms of readiness. This is the lowest readiness levels I've seen within our Army since I've been serving for the last 37 years.
Well, General, I agree, and I think the numbers confirm that. For instance, in the 1990s, this general episode I'm describing, at that problem, the military described 80% of conventional and unconventional forces as acceptable, with, quote, pockets of deficiency. Today, in contrast, at least on the Army side, you have said that only 15% of Army forces are acceptable, with 85% being below that. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator.
So that certainly puts numbers on exactly what you said, that today's situation is much worse. Now, in the 1990s, there was a response to that. The administration, President Clinton's administration, made a specific proposal and worked with everyone, including Republicans in Congress, to get $25 billion allocated for readiness. Will there be a specific administration proposal anytime soon to this far greater challenge?
I think, I can't answer your question, Senator. What I would say is I think it has to do, as the Chairman said earlier, the negotiations that are going on for the budget deal, and out of that we hope that there'll be something that comes back to the Department of Defense that allows us to deal with this 3 to 4 year window we've talked about and readiness challenges that we have, and get rid of this sequestration, which is, as everyone has said here numerous times, a horrible way to do business.
Well, I'm familiar with those negotiations. I don't think anything's being discussed currently that approaches a specific, concrete response to this particular problem. And I would urge, I know you all aren't the ultimate decision makers, but I would urge the administration to put forward a specific proposal, as President Clinton did in the 1990s, in a situation that I believe you're correct in saying was far less challenging, although it was serious. General, I also want to ask about some readiness issues regarding joint readiness training and the like. And I have a particular interest in that because some of that happens at Fort Polk in Louisiana. Sequestration has forced the cancellation of several combat training center rotations. Can you describe how important those rotations are and the impact on that readiness?
In FY13, we had to cancel 7 rotations, and what that means is you have usually it's a force of about 5,000 to 8,000 men and women who go there, who get a chance to train and really get certified in the kind of operations that we think they might have to deploy and do. So we weren't able to do that. Not only that, you lose a significant amount of experience that are gained by your leaders. For example, that equates to about 250 company commanders, about 50 battalion commanders, and 7 brigade commanders who did not get the training that is necessary for them to do the operations, and that also includes their soldiers. So that, and if that keeps happening, it just continually degrades the readiness. So in 14, what we're going to have to do is we're going to focus all of our dollars to 7 brigade elements. So at least I can get 7 brigades trained, because that's the only money I have to do that. Everyone else is going to go untrained. they will not be able to do the training necessary.
So if that is accomplished for 7 brigades only and no more, how would you describe the impact on critical core competencies and readiness?
What that means is we're going to have about a little over 20% of the force, maybe 25% of the force that is trained in its core competency. The rest will not be trained in their core competencies.
In general, I just want to underscore the specific training we're talking about is the training that's most relevant to the sort of operations we face today. Is that correct?
That's correct. If we had to deploy in the Middle East, if we had to deploy to Korea, if we had to deploy anywhere, that's the kind of training they are not receiving. And so what keeps me up at night is that if something happens and we're required to send soldiers, they might not be prepared in the way I think is the American people expect us to have them prepared.
Great. A final question for any or all of you. Has the standards in terms of what we are preparing for, in fact, been lowered over the last few years, the requirements, the readiness requirements?
Well, let me see. Lowering, I don't know if I'd say lowering. So what we've done is, let's take Afghanistan for example. So the units we're getting ready to go to Afghanistan are training very differently today. As General Amos mentioned, they're being trained to do training and advisory missions. So they're not training to do full spectrum operations, which we would normally train them to do, because they are just going to do that. So they have not been trained in that, in the things that we think are important as we develop the readiness levels in order to respond to contingencies.
But I guess what I'm asking, let me try to be clear. Overall, you know, in 2010 in the QDR, the requirement was to fight 2 wars on multiple fronts and win while engaged in significant counterterrorism operations. Hasn't that bar been lowered significantly?
It has.
As that bar has been lowered significantly, do you think the world has become a safer place?
No, as I stated earlier, I believe this is the most uncertain I've ever seen the international security environment.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Senator Vitter. Senator